Everyone thought the ceremony would end like any other, until a three-star admiral looked at the empty chair and chose to stand alone. The Grand Hall of the Naval Ceremonial Center was a sea of white uniforms and polished brass. Rows of chairs stood in perfect formation beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed decades of honor, sacrifice, and tradition. Outside, the Virginia sun beat down on manicured lawns where flags hung motionless in the humid air. Inside, over 300 officers, dignitaries, and family members had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine recognition ceremony, the kind where speeches are delivered, medals are pinned, and everyone goes home feeling proud. But today, something was different. Today, Vice Admiral Marcus Calloway would make a choice that would ripple through the entire Navy, a choice that would remind everyone present what honor truly means. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me. In the comments where you're watching from, I love knowing who's listening. The ceremony began precisely at 1400 hours. Admiral Calloway entered through the main doors, his chest decorated with ribbons that told stories of deployments to the Persian Gulf, peacekeeping missions in troubled waters, and a career spanning 32 years. He was a man known for following protocol to the letter, for maintaining composure under pressure, for never making a scene. At 61, with silver hair cut military short and eyes that had seen both the best and worst of humanity, he was the embodiment of naval tradition. The audience rose as he entered, then sat as the master of ceremonies gestured for them to be seated. But Admiral Calloway remained standing. At first, no one noticed. The opening remarks had begun, the usual acknowledgments of distinguished guests, the reading of the day's agenda. But as seconds turned into a full minute, then two, eyes began to drift toward the Admiral. He stood at attention, his gaze fixed not on the podium, not on the flags, but on a single empty chair in the third row. A chair that should have been occupied? A chair that bore a small placard with a name that most in the room had never heard. Petty Officer Second Class David Chen. The master of ceremonies faltered mid-sentence. A murmur rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Admiral Calloway's aide, a young lieutenant commander, leaned toward him and whispered something urgent. The Admiral didn't move, didn't acknowledge the man. His stance was unwavering. His jaw set with the kind of determination that comes not from stubbornness, but from conviction. The room grew thick with tension. Senior officers exchanged glances. The Secretary of the Navy, seated in the front row, shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how these things were done. This was a breach of protocol, a disruption of order. Someone needed to do something, but no one did. Because everyone was beginning to understand that something far more important than protocol was unfolding before their eyes. 3 months earlier, Petty Officer David Chen had been aboard the USS Michael Murphy, a guided missile destroyer conducting routine operations in the South China Sea. At 26 years old, Chen was an electronics technician, the kind of sailor who kept the ship's communications and radar systems running smoothly. He wasn't a SEAL or a fighter pilot. He didn't have a chest full of medals. He was, by most military standards, ordinary. But on a humid Tuesday morning, when a fire broke out in the ship's electrical room, Chen had done something extraordinary. He had gone back inside. The first two sailors had been evacuated safely. The fire suppression systems had activated. Protocol dictated sealing the compartment and letting the systems do their work. But Chen had heard something through the smoke. A voice, faint, calling for help. A third sailor, disoriented and overcome by fumes, was still inside. Chen didn't hesitate. He grabbed a respirator and plunged back into the inferno. He found Seaman Apprentice Marcus Rodriguez collapsed near the bulkhead and dragged him toward the exit, but the smoke was too thick, the heat too intense. Chen got Rodriguez out, pushed him into waiting arms. But when he tried to follow, a secondary explosion ripped through the compartment. David Chen died saving a life. Rodriguez survived because of him. The Navy had processed the paperwork. Chen would receive the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, awarded posthumously. His family had been notified. His mother, his younger sister, his girlfriend of 4 years, they had been invited to today's ceremony to accept the honor on his behalf. The invitation had been sent. The arrangements had been made, but somewhere in the bureaucratic machinery, something had failed. The Chen family's travel arrangements had been mishandled. Their flights had been canceled due to a scheduling error, and no one had provided alternatives. They were stuck in San Francisco, 3,000 miles away, desperately trying to reach Virginia, calling every number they had been given, pleading for help. And when they couldn't make it in time, when it became clear they wouldn't arrive, before the ceremony began, the decision had been made to proceed anyway. After all, there were other families to honor, other medals to award. The show must go on. Except Admiral Marcus Calloway disagreed that he had learned about the Chen family's situation only that morning. He had been handed a briefing packet that mentioned, almost as a footnote, that the Chen family would be unable to attend and their medal would be presented at a later date. Something about that line had stopped him cold. He had read David Chen's service record. He had spoken to the captain of the Michael Murphy. He had learned that Chen had been a quiet kid from Sacramento who loved photography and sent money home to help his mother pay rent. A young man who had re-enlisted not for glory, but because he believed in serving something larger than himself. And now, because of administrative incompetence, that young man's family wouldn't be there to see him. Admiral Calloway had made phone calls. He had demanded answers. He had been told, politely but firmly, that rescheduling a major ceremonial event wasn't feasible, that the medal could be presented later, that these things happen. He had been advised to let it go. He couldn't dot, so now he stood. And as he stood, something remarkable began to happen. One by one, officers throughout the hall rose to their feet. A captain near the back stood first, his face solemn. Then 2 commanders to his left. Then an entire row of lieutenants. Within 90 seconds, every single person in uniform had risen and stood at attention alongside the Admiral. The civilians followed Navy secretaries, congressional staffers, family members who didn't fully understand what was happening, but knew they were witnessing something profound. 300 people standing in silence, standing for a family that wasn't there, standing for a young man who had given everything. The master of ceremonies stood frozen at the podium. The Secretary of the Navy slowly got to his feet, his expression unreadable. And Admiral Calloway, for the first time since entering the hall, spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we will not proceed until the Chen family arrives. Petty Officer Chen earned the right to have his family present when his sacrifice is recognized. We will wait. The ceremony was postponed. Emergency arrangements were made. A military jet was dispatched to San Francisco. Chen's mother, sister, and girlfriend were flown to Virginia, arriving 6 hours later, exhausted and red-eyed and overwhelmed by what had been done for them. When they entered the hall that evening, the entire assembly was waiting. Admiral Calloway met them at the door, shook each of their hands, and quietly said, "Thank you for being here. Your son's sacrifice will never be forgotten." The medal was presented. Chen's mother accepted it with trembling hands, while his girlfriend wept against his sister's shoulder. The Admiral didn't give a grand speech. He simply looked at the woman holding her son's medal and said, "He was one of our finest." Later, reporters would ask Calloway why he had risked his reputation, why he had disrupted such an important ceremony. His answer was simple: because Petty Officer Chen was willing to risk everything for someone else. The least we could do was wait a few hours for his family. The story spread through the military like wildfire. Within days, administrative protocols for family notifications and travel arrangements were revised across all service branches. The officer responsible for the original error was quietly reassigned, and Admiral Calloway received thousands of messages from active duty personnel, veterans, and families thanking him for remembering what truly mattered. Because in the end, honor isn't about ceremonies or medals or perfectly executed protocols. It's about recognizing the sacred trust between those who serve and those who send them into danger. It's about refusing to let bureaucracy diminish sacrifice. It's about one man standing up and saying, "Not today, not on my watch, not for this." Family, the empty chair, had become a symbol. And the Admiral who refused to sit had reminded everyone watching that some things are worth standing for. Because kindness doesn't vanish, it waits. And it finds its way back. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand alone until others remember why they're there. If this story moved you, drop a comment below and tell me about a time someone stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And if you're new here, subscribe because there are more stories like this that need to be told. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the moment demands it. Thanks for listening.